I'm Melanie Swayze, a global real estate advisor with Gibson Sotheby's based in Metro Boston. I closely advise homebuyers and sellers of all stages of life, guiding them to intelligent, winning decisions.
I'm Derek Lumpkins, a real estate investor with a background in community organizing. I also enhance equity and inclusion initiatives at companies and organizations, and I guide leaders through executive coaching.
When we get together, we dive into the intersections of culture, class, mindset, and Black freedom.
Welcome to the Blacklining Forum,
a podcast about Black wealth, power, and land.
Hey, good morning, Melanie.
Good day to you, Derek Lumpkins.
You're looking quite well today.
Oh, thank you. I will take it. I will take it.
I mean, are you not well?
I don't feel perfect, but I'm glad that I'm emanating perfection. So that's great.
Well, perfection's overrated these days.
Thank you, Derek.
I mean, there's so much going on. Perfection's overrated in general. But in lieu of my usual question, because you know our usual back and forth. How are you? You say I'm happy to be alive. I'm trying to get beyond that. So I wanted to ask you. It might sound a little bit random, but I will make it weave back in.
I'm not worried.
You shouldn't be worried. But I wanted to ask you, what do you think of the zodiac? Like, do you have any belief in it? Do you have any thoughts about it? Do you have any feelings about it? It could be any zodiac, Chinese zodiac, Western zodiac. Just curious.
I think I'm nominally curious. I think I'm curious because intelligent and sensitive people in my life and in my world lots of them are attuned to the zodiac in some way. I don't know that it really resonates for me that much, but there have been a few things that I've heard along the way about my own zodiac location and time and that of someone else who's very close to me that make me think there's something relevant about it. But I don't think about it. I don't track it. I don't really care that much for predictions.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. You?
So I'm fairly similar. I find it interesting. I find it kind of fun. I like meeting people who have the same zodiac sign and seeing where we have similarities, but also noticing, okay, we're also different people from wherever, so we're going to have our differences. But of course, whether it's the Western zodiac and our version of the 12 months, or the Chinese zodiac where it's the 12 animals, whatever it is, they kind of complement, they kind of don't. But just so where I'm going with this is with all that's been going on in 2025, this is the year of the snake. And 2025 has seen so much upheaval, so much change, so much just dysfunction in some ways. And I have a good friend who, whenever I say, oh, this is going on in my life, or this is going on just generally, she'll say, it's the year of the snake. That's her first thing. She'll keep saying it's the year of the snake. And I'm like, and at first I was like, what does that have to do with anything? She's like, it's the snake, it's sneaky. It's, sneaks around, you can't trust it. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I think that might be a very Western perspective, especially a very Christian one, with the serpent and the Garden of Eden and blah, 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 and how that tricked Eve eating the apple and how that caused the downfall of man out of all the things. But, I was that also started making me think about where we will possibly go today with this conversation around a plan B or a plan C or a plan D or whatever number of letters you need. Because, with so much that has been going on leading up to 2025 and then in this year, and then who knows what's coming up in the next year, because the next year is, depending upon when we broadcast, we either already have started or be just about to start. It seems like more and more of us need to have a plan B or a plan C or a plan D. And a plan B could be like, you need to move or you need to do something related to the economy. A plan C could be related to climate change. Plan D could be something else. And so, just with so much going on, I'm just thinking, yeah, like we really do need to start thinking about, if you're not already doing so, all the different plans you need to have. We've talked about having wills and having trusts and having these other things that sort of on paper position you a certain way. But then there's also like, what are you actually going to do with your investments? What are you actually going to do with your person? What are you going to do with your family or your friends or your community to prepare for the changes or to respond to the changes that are happening or that may happen very soon?
Yes. and everything you said, I thought was really like potent and important. And I'm still at the beginning of what you were describing about what could it mean to think about the serpent. When you use the word dysfunction, I thought that was accurate about 2025. And then I also, the next word that came to my mind, my senses, was dissolution. Not, as in the coming apart. And I don't actually know what a serpent is. I don't know if a serpent is a certain kind of snake or if serpent just refers generally. But then the next thought that came to mind when I thought dissolution was about shedding skin, which I believe, I don't know that all snakes do, but I believe that that's part of the world of snakes. And so, yes, your person, the things you have, the things that you identify with, being prepared to shed or willing to shed, to change form, to move on to some next iteration. Yeah.
Well, thinking of shedding your outer layer, don't forget butterflies do the same thing.
Yes.
So, it doesn't always have
Yes.
to be, it can also be a complete transformation for the better that allows you to take off,
precisely.
to take off and to move into new
Which is
places
true for a
in a
snake
beautiful
too.
way.
Which is true for a snake too. And I like that you're describing that because, again, I'm not plugged in necessarily to the zodiac as a story, as a narrative, but throughout this year, as lots of things have been presented to me and requiring change in my life, business and personal, multiple people in my life have brought up the butterfly, and they're like, Melanie, Chrysalis. And so allow yourself to go through the thing that can feel excruciating at times, where you're being squeezed, you're under pressure because you are changing form. You're taking the ingredients of this time as nutrients that are going to allow you to change form into something else. So that's I mean, it's a nice perspective to have. And yeah, again, letting go of things that you thought you had a handle on, and that had a handle on you. And yeah, so I like that. I like that metaphor.
Well, let's see if our guest will pick up on that metaphor and see where he takes us on this journey of transformation as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because the way we're talking would lead people's minds probably to some kind of what you would call a woo place. But our conversation today is probably going to be a lot about very practical financial tools and ways to think about investment as a way to have, like you say, a plan B or C or D. Yeah, I like it. All right, well, we're going to invite today Paul Laka. He is a Cameroonian changemaker whose worldview has been shaped by lived experiences across Africa and Europe. He is the founder and managing partner of Fuest, that's Fuest, Fuest Construction Brokers, a platform designed to make diaspora investments secure, transparent, and impactful. Paul also serves as chairman of the board of the Joseph Laka Foundation, where he supports children in Cameroon's Northwest region with access to education and opportunity. Delighted to welcome you on, Paul.
Good to be here, guys. Good to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Before we get into the meaty conversation, what are your thoughts on the zodiac?
Right now, I'm not really a big believer of the zodiac. Used to be one time. But I feel like wanting to establish a pattern before things happen. So I just like to discover things myself. So trying to want to understand them before it happens kills the very essence of living. So I try not to pay attention to that. But there was a time that's the first thing I'll check in the morning, just to see how the day would look like. But then it kills the very purpose of living.
But Paul, if people in your life try to give you context with the zodiac as a frame of reference, like Derek's friend saying it's the year of the snake, does that somehow light up your perspective? Does it help you get perspective on what is happening? I'm just curious.
So, I mean, everything around us plays a role. It could be some other person's perspective or idea or their belief. And then that could shed some light into how you see things. It helps to see things from another person's point of view as well sometimes. And it helps, just paint a better picture. So yes, it could be that it might make you look at things a bit objectively.
Yeah.
You might not share the same belief, but then it might, just help a little bit more to make things a bit clearer to you.
That's a light.
So,
yeah.
yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing that. Didn't want to derail you too far, but just was curious to see what you thought about that. So part of why we wanted to bring you on the show is because of your ideas and your suggestions for new investors and in a place where people may not necessarily think about investing first. And so I'll just put that there and then let you sort of talk about what you do, and then we'll ask you some questions from there.
Yeah, I mean, let me start by saying that the world right now is, competing for the African market. So, how I see this is Africans and the diaspora should be the first in line to tap into that market, to leverage that. And because I haven't been in the diaspora myself, traveled as well, and see a lot of diasporans who do not have any ownership of their roots, who don't have, any plan. In a world where one policy change can just change our entire lives, it's a scary place to be in. So that's what really defines or, pushes me to do what I do and how to help people take advantage of Africa, which is growing, which has a lot of potential, especially for us especially for us in the diaspora. So, in a nutshell, that's just what I do. And also because there's something interesting you said before we got live, Derek, when you said someone made you to understand wealth is not only money. That's where I come in as well. That's what I believe as well. Wealth is not only money; it's impact, is belonging, is connecting to your roots, ownership of a piece of home. I use home here loosely. I mean, for everyone who is from the motherland, and just building a legacy, which from where I'm coming from, is a bit foreign to us. A lot of where I come from, a lot of people don't think about the next 30 years. They think about how can I survive today. So that's also a part of what I do, and trying to change that narrative and encourage people to think a little bit, to dream first, to try and own a piece of home or a piece of the motherland, and then to think multiple generations. What can I do? How can I make it easier for those coming behind? And how can I impact that community while building wealth for myself? So that's just it.
So, okay, that's a really good setup. So let's, kind of define a few things. So when we had our intro conversations to sort of plan out this conversation, we had to be very specific about when you say diasporans, because Melanie and I would consider ourselves to be diasporans, and we are, but you're talking more specifically about folks who more recently born or coming from Africa. I don't know if you mean Africa generally or Cameroon specifically, but folks who may have moved, who may be first generation immigrants, maybe second generation or first generation born in a Western or some other country outside of Africa, as those being the diasporans versus those of us from the US, from Canada, from England, from Brazil.
I feel we all make the diaspora. The way I define it is, if you have a link to that root, like if you have a link to Africa, then you're part of that community already. So we're talking about, if I had to specify, I would be like the African diaspora, but then it's diaspora. So the African diaspora and diaspora as a whole, the diasporans as a whole, who want to be able to, leverage on that opportunity in the continent.
But you're also saying that your direct experience is often with other Cameroonians who've moved outside of the mother country, and they don't necessarily they're not conditioned in the mindset of looking back to say, not only do I not say I don't only have a place that I can go and stay when I want to visit family, but I'm actually investing my money, my resource into my homeland in order to benefit others and myself in the meantime. So I think it's like you're experimenting it with more immediately with Cameroonians, but it really does apply to all of us in the diaspora if we were curious and can think big picture about rethink actually how we've all been conditioned to think about Africa, which is like Africa needs something. And to say, oh, I want to be a co-investor in this place that, as you say, is growing, evolving, and we want to be part of that and build together.
I think that's spot on. So it's for everyone. So even though my experiences are, directly with, most Africans, mostly from West and Central Africa, the solutions are for it's for every diasporan who wants to make that investment. Not, who is thinking about financial security, who is thinking about reconnecting with their roots, who is thinking about, just security in general, just finding a second home or a place where they can go and, express themselves, be one with their roots, and just, feel like they belong. I think that's what I'm looking for. Feel like they belong. So that's it. And but the thing is, they also have to have a certain mindset. What I mean by that is collaborating, the willingness to belong, and the willingness to also take part in developing that society. So it's like having a stake in the place where they want to call home in the future.
In the future.
Yes.
So thinking about mindset, and also connecting it back to our talk earlier around like having a plan B or a plan C or a plan D. One of the things that we talked about in our intro conversation, you were saying that some people who are recently coming from Africa, who may have been in the US or the UK, are now starting to come back. They're starting to go back to their home countries because they're a bit disillusioned. And so as they're going back, you're starting to talk to them, or maybe you're having conversations with them about thinking about investing or thinking about being involved in a different way. So can you sort of walk us through the different stages of that? So, why are people thinking about coming back? And then also, like, what is it like to start talking to people and getting them to change their mindsets?
A lot of the people in the US, a lot of the clients we have, especially in the US, has just been because of the political climate right now. It's not favorable for most of them. And some have just been outright repatriated, like just send it back home. Okay. And that is like an example for the others to see, because these are people who, once they got here, forgot completely about where they came from, had no sort of financial security or anything or any backup, but now have to go back to that same place where they left because of certain conditions, and who during their time in the diaspora did nothing to try and change the circumstances to go and start from scratch. So it is a really scary, like speaking from experience, it's a scary place to be in. And then you have the other group of people who generally think real estate should be a status symbol. So they go about building houses just to show off, that have that can't give them any source of income. So you have that second group of people. But then when, things change, they don't have anything to fall back on. So it's about changing how they think. So one, for the guy who has nothing invested back home, to try and invest and build that safety net, because for most of us, especially, one policy change can change everything for you. And secondly, you should be able, so we give advice on the types of properties you should be looking into, like looking at it as an investor, not just trying to, construct a home because you want to be like, okay, I have made some money here, I should get like a mansion or something, because that is the way a lot of us think. And this comes back to my point earlier. We do not think past ourselves. We do not think past, we don't think in 30 years. We don't think we could invest for our kids, for our grandkids just to make it a bit easier for them. So that is where we are.
But there's a communal aspect to it too, isn't there?
Absolutely. So so the communal aspect is, I mean, the job creation aspects as well, trusting our local, developers and our local construction firms, our masons and our construction workers as well, helps to help to give employment in a country where unemployment, or in a continent where unemployment is really prevalent and stuff. So it also helps put food on the table. So it has that aspect to it. And then for those who get into affordable housing, it makes it easier for people to be able to afford, because I mean, the middle class is growing with Africa rising and all, but it's still a struggle. You still have a lot of people who live below that poverty line. So making sure we have affordable housing is something as well. So yeah, those are just some of the
Thank you. I want to make sure that our audience is following us on a few things. One, just to center that, because you were speaking kind of quickly and with your accent, Paul, I want to make sure that people heard you say the word repatriated. And when you're talking about policy change, there are people in the US from the Cameroon, it sounds like, who, not of their own choosing, had to return to Cameroon without a plan.
Sent
back. That's a nice euphemistic way to put it. So that's one thing we just want to center. That, we've talked about on our podcast, Derek, one of the impacts of gentrification being that Black people are moved about. Like, migratory patterns are a result of what's happening in the economy and the political economy, and I think soon the climate economy, that make it that Black folks just have to move and may not have a plan and may not have the wherewithal. And what Paul is talking about is, what if you had the wherewithal? What if you were thinking big picture? What if you were thinking about how to be responsive as opposed to reactive? So that's one thing. I also want to make it clear that it sounds like you're describing, you're helping our audience understand that there's a way that wherever they are in the diaspora, if they want to invest in, at least for now, Cameroon, but parts of Africa, by buying real estate, helping construct real estate, they're creating housing. In the process, they're creating jobs. They're creating an investment, potentially an income source for themselves, passive income, and property, or at least an investment that can allow them to have some maneuverability should they need to get a home for themselves in the motherland at some time.
Absolutely.
Okay, just making sure people understand that. And we can keep going. There was another thought I had, and it's flitted off from me for a second, but it'll return.
Was it in any case, at any point, the difference between someone who's coming from a Western country and someone who's coming from one of the African countries?
No, but we can go there. Do you want to say?
I was just sort of thinking about, the purchasing power, the differential in purchasing power.
Yes.
So I don't know, how many African folks you've worked with versus how many Western diaspora Black folks you worked with. But in terms of that purchasing power and also the expectations, because we're talking about mindset, but then also what undergirds the mindset is the actual purchasing power. How do you help people navigate that, whether they're from, let's say, from Cameroon or from Canada? How do you help them sort of walk through that and understand, you don't want to recreate patterns that have caused harm in the past. You actually want to do this in a way that's ethical and that it also is beneficial to a wider body of people.
Can I actually tie this? I know that you'll be able to link these two things, Paul, because the thought that I had flitted off from me was actually, in my mind, related to what you just asked, Derek, which is, well, what is happening when you say Africa is building? First of all, as an American, born and raised, I'm always very unsettled by people just talking about Africa as if it's one place. It's a massive continent, right? So this is all from colonial history that we just think of it as a block, a blob. So, but when you say Africa broadly is building, evolving, growing, what does that mean? Why is it happening? Do you see strands of that are sustainable? And then, yes, how do we plug in a way that actually is sustainable and ethical?
And supportive.
Yeah.
So when I group them together is because we see this growth across the continent. So that's why I'm putting in this one, because we've got all those opportunities spread across the continent.
Like what? Give us some ideas.
In manufacturing, in fintech, in real estate, in agribusiness. So these are all growth opportunities. These are all opportunities that we're waking up to see that we can do more, and we are trying now to build. But then, Melanie, when you talked about sustainability, that's where we come in, because we need to be able to do it in a sustainable way. We need to be able to, do it in a way that can be beneficial, not only today, but in the future, and can keep growing. And that's why we think about, one, we need to not only build wealth for ourselves, but create a ripple effect so that others can benefit from that, so we can go a bit further. And to come to Derek's question about if it's an African who recently left, or an African diasporan, or someone who is born and raised in the US, there's not much of a difference, because you all are approaching that investment from the diaspora. The only difference would be in just certain regulations about ownership. You may have to go through a different process, while the other person goes through like a pretty simple process. But at the end of the day, the investments are pretty much the same.
Although, but Derek, were you getting at the vast inequity of resources, that for somebody who's a more recent immigrant, they may not have as much resource. It might be a bigger haul for them to do this kind of investment than someone who perhaps has more financial stability, and it's not as big a haul for them to make this kind of investment. Were you thinking along those lines?
Kind of, sort of. So yeah, so there's the purchasing differential. So in the sense that, maybe someone who's recently from Nigeria may be able to buy a house, where someone who's from Canada may be able to buy an apartment building. So, this is a differential. But with that purchasing differential, there's also the difference of expectations. Like, well, I'm buying this much, and so I should have this much influence.
Entitlement.
Also, there's the entitlement. But then also, as I'm sort of pulling off of what you said earlier, Melanie, in the sense that, we come from these Western countries that have sort of a outdated colonial view of a lot of these African countries. And so the sense of like, what can I get away with, may also sort of creep into some of this as well. So I'm just kind of like, well, how, like, if I were to make an investment, I would try my best not to come with that expectation. But also, like, I know that through my training over X number of decades on this earth, I may come in a certain way and not even understanding that I'm doing so. And so I'm just trying to figure out, or trying to like learn from Paul, like, how are people sort of educated in order to not do that? And also, or maybe Paul, if you've seen this happening already, like, what are some of the things that are happening on the ground to sort of like address that?
Because that's kind of inherent in real estate, that there's going to be grabbing and skirting of rules. Yeah.
We always, even for our clients, we always try to play by the rules. But then something that I pulled from the incidents in Ghana and the way it was, divided and all, what I always, we currently have one client from the US, and this lady, and before we had to continue, I had one recommendation. You need to visit Cameroon. You first of all need to understand if that's a good fit for you. You need to, get used to the community you want to invest in. If you're going to call that place a second home, if you're going to invest there, then you need to be able to, understand just how things work and try and belong. So I think everyone should, before you move, but then it's about, I think I said this earlier, it's about coming in as a partner, coming in as a fellow African who is, returning to their roots, because that ownership for someone who has been in the US or who was born and raised in the US, that ownership is kind of reversing 400 years of economic disconnection.
Yeah.
So that is something profound. So it's about coming in with that sense of, brotherhood coming to a place where it's home, you're reconnecting, and not coming with because in Ghana we saw cases where a lot of the people who moved thought they were kind of superior to the locals.
Well,
And then that caused a lot of issues. And now a situation which was welcomed by the entire Ghanaian population.
Government,
now it's causing a lot of issues, and you hear people saying they need to go back, they need to do that. And we need to understand, with brothers and sisters, we need to understand we all have the same roots, we come from the same place. I mean, let's forget about our place of birth. We have the same ancestors. You get what I mean? So we need to behave as such. We need to try and, just be a bit more accommodating, and not bring that mindset of superiority and all that. And if you do that, you'll enjoy it. You would like it, because we're a little bit more receptive and welcoming to people who come from sometimes too much, if I may say so.
Oh, Paul, it's really nice to hear this from your perspective, to hear your welcoming, because we've actually spoken on this podcast. We've dedicated at least one full episode, if not more, to the question of what is an expat, what is an expatriate, and what does it mean for a Black person to go back to the motherland from wherever in the diaspora? Because how can you do it without coming with entitlement and a perspective that is influenced by colonization? We're conditioned in it. How do you not do it? And how do you not contribute further to gentrification? As somebody who could say, oh, this is cheap land, I should just get a bunch of it and drive up the prices and so on. How do you fit yourself into the economy in the way that it's contributing and not extractive, and not displacing people financially, geographically, and culturally, and politically? So we know that these are big questions, but it's nice to hear you coming with this receptive sense of like, actually, this can work. Like, okay.
It can absolutely work. And the solution to not being entitled is just for folk not to be entitled, to coming knowing that, they're coming to belong to. And it would, I think a lot of the thing, what happens is because we have a different idea of what Africa currently looks like. And that's why I really encourage everyone to go there and see.
Yeah.
And a lot of these lines are very visible when you come to the West or when you're here in the diaspora. We really do not see those back home. I'm being completely honest here.
I think you're being delicate, and I'm not exactly following.
No. We like.
You can be blunt with us.
You wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. Like, I'm Cameroonian. I'll speak for Cameroon.
Okay.
And this is fact. We don't have a particular name back in Cameroon for Black Americans. We call everybody who has been to the diaspora and back a certain name. If you're a Cameroonian who has gone to the West, or to you've traveled abroad and you've come back, and if you're an American who was born and raised in Detroit and is home, we are both going to have the same name.
Is it a good name? Can we know that?
I don't think it's a good name.
We call them Bushfallers.
He hasn't said if that's good or bad, so I take it as in between the lines.
It just means that you're a man of means. It means you're well traveled. You've traveled.
I see.
So it just says you have a different perspective of things. You see things a bit differently.
But that even implies a certain expectation that we be sensible. It's like, if you have more perspective, you've had more breadth of experience, then you should come back and contribute, as opposed to be impinging on people when you return. And so I'm assuming that name also must have some kind of pejorative tone too, because it's like, who do they think they are coming back here? That's what I would expect. And you're smiling, so that could be in there. No, that's amazing.
So with great power comes great responsibility. Yes, you're expected to, do things a bit differently, but then, yeah. The thing is, if you come in with that entitlement, that's the problem. And it's the same for anyone. That's why I'm saying, if I were to go back home with that same sense of entitlement, no one is going to take that. So it's not different from you or myself, especially if you're Black. So there's really no clear line there. And I'm being completely honest. There's no clear distinction. There's no clear line. Maybe when you talk, they will be like, oh, okay. The accent, the same like now I'm talking.
We're not just talking, the way we look, the way we dress, our body movements, our gestures. So I would also expect that people would want to take me for a ride and be like, actually, we can milk her because she is a person of means, which I think is fair game. That's fine. And so that's why you play the role that you play, Paul, as a broker, right? So you're the person on the ground to help mediate information, access to opportunities, and go through the actual procedural process of identifying property, acquiring it, preparing it, constructing it, and getting it to start to earn income by getting renters and so on, and basically helping someone attain and manage their asset. But what you're also saying is they need to have a stake in it as a human, not just someone who's looking at numbers on a spreadsheet, and get to know the community, be plugged in, be vested in the culture, in the political scene in some way that's informed, so that they're not reproducing negative effects, but also so that they grow from it. And the people they're partnering with, like you, your company, can benefit from that partnership.
Absolutely.
And that's actually something that, so before you joined us, Melanie, Paul and I were talking about. And for those who have watched the reparations episode of this podcast, that's what we really began talking about, this broader definition of wealth. It's not just dollars and cents. It's also your health, it's your education, it's your cultural autonomy, it's the way in which you can like move your body and be in space. It's like all of these things. And so actually I was going to ask Paul, like if his business has seen people investing in ways that are not necessarily dollar or euro based, but if they're sort of like supporting cultural organizations or supporting local health initiatives, have you seen that as well? Is that something that's sort of next level for what you might do?
I think instead that's always been the case. I come from I come from the NGO space. I come from international organizations. I've gone through YALI. We're required to partner with the diaspora and champion initiatives such as these. That's the norm. That's what often happens. And that's why we're trying to say, yes, we can receive all these, but then we can also invest, which is great. Don't get me wrong. It's great that they invest in our health, in our culture and stuff like that, which happens a lot instead, Derek. That's the normal. But then we're saying the fintech startup could use that, make some money, and help develop the community in a sustainable way.
Yeah, build housing.
So instead of just supporting that and calling it charity, let's start these partnerships that can be more sustainable. And this is it. If we fail, they gain the experience to be able to try again.
Yeah.
It's not about, rather than just using as charity. And this actually goes right to the Africans in the diaspora. So Melody, that's why I was telling you, there's not much of a difference. If they're trying to milk you as someone who is born and raised in the US, they're going to try to milk me too because I'm from the diaspora.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? And because that's always been the norm. It's always been siblings or family sending money back home for that.
Yeah.
For healthcare, for school fees and stuff like that. We could then be partners in a way that we can make some money from all these endeavors. So yes, to answer your question, we see that a lot instead, where the international community and a lot of people, champion these, causes and all that. But the funny thing is, if you add up all of that help, it doesn't amount to the figure we send back home as diasporans in Africa. I mean, back to Africa. It's not up to that amount. So what we're trying to do is, or the question we're asking is, where is that money going to? how can we use that sustainably? Just 20%, 10% of 100 billion would be a lot.
Yeah.
100 million, sorry, would be a lot. So we have to look for ways to be able to use that, invest, and get something in return as well. That way we're preparing for when everything changes.
When everything changes. So I mean, this is like a multi-tiered benefit kind of strategy. It's longer term investment, but it's also knowing that a lot of people in diaspora are already sending remittances back home. That money, it's almost like it's, pardon this analogy, but it's like paying rent, right? So it's going to immediate needs, but you're not seeing a return from it, from paying toward it. And so what you're saying is, look, yeah, we're sending money back for school fees and all the rest, health needs probably, and all the rest. But what if we were sending a portion of that money or using that money differently to contribute to the construction of housing that family can live in and that the family can earn rental income from by creating housing for others? And then as that's going well, maybe also help, maybe the building that you construct also has commercial space in it. And so you're helping a local small business get off the ground as well. And so I understand what you're saying about plugging in and actually really investing. And I know this as someone in the Jamaican diaspora that, yeah, so much of the island, and especially now since Hurricane Melissa, it's so apparent how reliant the island is on remittances, people sending money and food and other goods back home. But what if there were a way to invest that money in a way that allows people on the ground enough resource and enough control and enough agency to build for themselves, as opposed to just being dependent on remittances or dependent on the goodwill of nonprofit organizations? So you're talking about an in-between. It's not just the NGOs, which they have their place. And it's not just families doing their one-to-one thing, which is really critical. There's this kind of in-between, which is, can we become co-investors in, I use the word sustainable. It's a faulty word. It's a problematic word. It promises too much. It's not accurate, but something about, can we help build something? One of the things I think about both in parts of Africa and the Caribbean is like, China gets it, right? They're going to start building roads, right? Building public transport, building infrastructure, putting in solar power, right? What if diasporans were helping our fellow country people do it for themselves, right? And maybe our investment, which feels small when you think about it in a one-to-one way, but if you pool it, can have significant impact. What if that helps you rethink your ability to actually make change back home?
One thing I just want to potentially throw out there, so not knowing these political systems very well, but when I think of China and Chinese investment, especially on the state level, the state is behind it. The state is fueling it. The state is driving it. And so things that happen in China are done on a scale that most other places, not even no matter what they can or can't, they just don't do. And so I'm just kind of wondering, Paul, like in Cameroon, maybe in Ghana, maybe in another country of, does the state help? Is the state supportive? Does the state provide pathways that makes this investing easier, so it can eventually be done at a larger scale?
Sadly, no. And this is why another part of what we do is try and leverage on, local ways for us to, help each other. Local ways of putting our resources together so it can be big. Obviously, Melanie, we're not going to match up the Chinese investors. They're not going to be, which is a big problem for us, because a place like my local area, they're dominating. You can't keep up with that. But sadly, no. The government is lagging behind when it comes to this. For instance, my company has been trying just to get some of the tax breaks or assistance that we can get as diasporans to be able to drive that investment back home, because it is one of the developmental goals, pulling diaspora capital. And I've been going for almost 4 months now without getting any feedback. So at this point, one resorts to leveraging on our local schemes. So helping pulling resources together. We've seen a lot of, I'm going to have like a tour from the 14th. I'm going to be all over the UK and then Canada, trying to meet these small Cameroonian communities and trying to say, we could pull our resources together as diasporans and invest in grants and like in bigger projects. We could have like a multi-use complex, everything, so that we can benefit from rental income monthly. We can benefit from, warehouses as well. We could get into, agribusiness, or we could, farm a few things, some of the cash crops. Another place is manufacturing. It's so big, but then as individuals, we cannot get into it. Yes. So we need to be able to lean and feed off each other. We have these communities everywhere. So if you can just educate them and say, we could do something together, just as the firm, we could have tighter contracts. We could make sure it's legally binding in a way that, it's beneficial to everybody, and then everyone benefits. But then if it's the government help, no. So we need to find other ways to make this work. And I wrote an article about that as well, because if we keep waiting for the government to do what they're supposed to do, especially as Africans, then we're not going to, there's going to be no growth, because most of our government, I don't know if you're aware of what is happening in Cameroon right now.
No.
It's a disaster. Like the election, we have a president that's been there for 42 years. He's been, he didn't win the election, but he was proclaimed as, something else. So now we have people in the streets, people are dying, people have been shot, and it's scary. And coming from a part of the country where, war has been, we've been fighting the Anglophone crisis for a long time now. So they're not helping. So we need to find ways to fend for ourselves, or else we're going to not see the kind of growth that we expect, and we're going to just keep complaining. So that's our reality. That's where we are. So we need to make it work for us.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to be an annoying American at the moment and say that also, that political reality also does mean that people have to understand or be willing and comfortable with investing in risk. Like, let me re-say that. Investment always involves risk, but high risks that you may not see immediate returns. Like it might, you get into it, like you say, from a legacy perspective and an impact perspective. And yes, a fallback perspective if you need a place to return to. And more of us are recognizing that we might need a place to go to. But yeah, it's understanding that you've got to roll with the punches that are coming, and that it's not just, oh, let me plunk some money down here and watch it grow. It's like you have to be willing to be a partner, even as people are out in the streets fighting for political power. So I just want to say that too. It's not necessarily a glide path of, oh, let's give money up Paul this amount of cash and say, let's figure out how to capitalize on it. It's understanding the context and being along for the ride as things are evolving.
But to be totally fair, everything you described is the United States as well.
I knew that you were going to say that.
Everything.
I knew that you were going to say that. And for some reason, and it could be my conditioning, something about, even still, there's so much that's being gutted in the United States. There's still some aspects of things that are relatively predictable, because you're not making it from scratch yet. There's precedent. And so I think that's all I'm acknowledging, is that you're starting something from scratch in the midst of lots of change where people don't know how to do it. They're learning. And so there's a lot of risk involved with that. And then also the context of what's happening on the ground. So yeah, it might mean that, this is a place that people may not be flocking to for a while, but the folks on the ground who might have less resource still need housing, still need jobs. And so it is a partnership. It is a partnership. It's not just an investment in the way that we tend to think of that, at least from the US context. When you think about real estate, it's like, I want to go in and I want to return. you know?
True.
Yeah. So that's
But
I'm just trying to name that.
yeah, and I agree. And at the same time, yes, a lot of what exists what holds the U.S. together is precedent. We're finding that out. A lot of
That's
this
right.
precedent and tradition
That's
is
right.
not actual
That's
law.
right.
It's not actual
Or
policy.
even if
Sort
it's
of like
law, how do you guarantee
right.
that the law is abided? Yeah.
Right. And so like you're at risk just by sitting in your chair in the US. Maybe not in the same, obviously not in the same way
Not
as
as
if you put
exposed,
down
not
ten
as
thousand
exposed.
dollars in, yeah,
Yeah.
not as much as if it's a different sense of risk if you put down $10,000 in Cameroon or wherever. But I think that's also kind of exciting because because we've had so many conversations on this podcast about
Yeah.
creating what's next and being a
Yeah.
part of what's next. Like as things fall apart or change or as
Yeah.
opportunities come and go, like
Yeah.
what are we going to do individually, as a family, as a community, to be part of what's next? And here's Paul saying, hey, what's next is over here. What's next? It's here, it's right here. And so it's like, well, yeah, there's some risk involved. But as you said, there's always a risk when it comes to investing. And so if this is a risk where it's not just a financial risk, but it's also an opportunity.
Yes.
To be
Where
part of
there's
creating
risk,
something
there's
new.
reward. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, sure, it may not come right away, but the financial return, the financial deposit you put in is relatively low compared to what you'd put in a Western country. So even if you don't get an immediate return, your initial investment is relatively small. So you can theoretically, I shouldn't speak for all investors, but theoretically you can afford that small risk. Like generally, you shouldn't invest anything you're not willing to risk anyway. So if you're going to put in something and it's relatively small to what it would be back in your home country, then I mean, this is me speaking. I would be like, yeah, let me take this risk because especially if I'm going to be part of building something new and supporting a positive impact, I like that idea and I like that sense of being part of that development, even if it is something that is outside of my experience and outside of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
I like how Paul's
It's
just smiling at
interesting.
us.
It's interesting to watch.
Yes, because
we're the reason why we exist. So it's interesting to see you guys, paint that picture or put it out there because this is the exact reason why we exist. So what First does is try and mitigate that risk. Risk is involved in every investment, but the thing is going in on your own, especially to a country that you have no experience in navigating, it's even riskier.
Yeah.
So what we are doing is we are mitigating that risk for you. We're executing. And when we talk about partnership, it's not in the sense of, required shared responsibility. We're just saying, if you're going to call this home, then you might as well be part of it. You get what I mean? So we're doing this. If this has to be an investment, if you're thinking that, Cameroon or Nigeria or Senegal is the next big thing, I might as well put my money there. Then we're here to help you execute that. If I'm not going there, you need just to make sure you have, the right means to be able to, pull that money out and put it in as you choose. But what we're doing is we're executing it. So we've put in place. We recently were talking about with the marketing team trying to make it very clear to people we're selling trust. We're not selling. We're selling trust. So it's about processes in place to be able to make sure that that investment is almost guaranteed. So if you're going to invest in that real estate space, we're trying to tell you it's going to be 70% sure that it will be executed. That's why we have these guidelines in place, or frameworks in place. We have the insurances in place and all of those things just to cover that risk because nothing is really, completely secure.
Guaranteed. Yeah. I appreciate you saying this, and it's allowing us to talk about the full spectrum of it. And Derek and I often are like a seesaw back, one of us is really concerned where the other one is like, oh, this makes so much sense, and so there's a balance in even the perspective, where I'm saying, investing in an economy that I have really practically no context about, I'm going to have questions. And it's not even that I'm worried about the amount, but I want something to go well, right? And I want to have a realistic perspective about how that could go. What does well look like, and what does not well look like? And as long as I'm clear about that, then I can go in informed. So I'm saying, like, as annoying kind of, maybe you could say overeducated American. I want context, but I also know that this is new. And so, like, as Derek said, that's part of what's exciting about it. And it's like, okay, given that this is new, let's really be realistic about the risk, the downside, but also then be really clear about why I'm in this for the long haul. And so that's just interesting to me. And yeah.
And it's not like I don't have questions or that I wouldn't have questions, but also it's sort of like, I don't want my questions to become so numerous and so voluminous and so much of their own barriers. I don't
That's
make any
right.
forward motion. Like I want to, or at least lateral motion. Like I want to have some type of movement. Of course, not backwards, but sometimes that happens too. But I want to move. I don't want to feel stuck in place because the world is always moving around us. We may say, like, I'm going to stay right here. I'm going to like stake my flag, and then
under
I'm
us.
not going to move. Yes, and so everything is constantly in motion. Everything is constantly shifting. So if everything's moving anyways, I may as well move in the direction that I want to go in. And if it supports other people, even better.
Love it.
Even better.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Pick a path and walk it.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. So Paul, before we go, where can people go to learn more about your company? Because there are people who are listening who may not be watching. And so, if you wanted to say what your website is, we'll also add it to the show notes. But like, how can people get in touch with you?
Through our website, or just directly through, you can get us directly through WhatsApp as well, or send us an email to our official email. I prefer WhatsApp because it's direct and it's just straight to the point without going through all the social media stuff. As I said, this is high-stake environment. We're talking about money, so you want to be able to ask your questions directly. We have a WhatsApp number that you can get in touch with us, book a consultation. I'll be happy to send that number to you, so that, because we know a lot of people have a lot of questions, so they should be able to understand a bit more before trying to even consider if they want to move forward. So our website, you can get all the information from our website, www.fuezconstructionbrokers.com, and just send us a WhatsApp message or an email, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. You can also follow us on social media, on Instagram as well, or you can just follow my personal account as well, PM Laka 1 on Instagram as well. So there you have it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your insights and the information. And we'll look forward to learning more. And Melanie, we should take a trip to Cameroon.
Okay.
With Paul.
Yeah, naturally.
When? Where?
For those who are not looking on the video, Paul is looking at his clock like, okay, let's schedule that.
Let's do that right now. I'm done with that.
I think we have a couple of things we need to get through the for the next couple of months first, but we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you on that one. But definitely like to do that.
Alrighty, guys.
So for those of you in the audience, thank you again for joining us. Please feel free to send us your questions and your comments. We always love to get those. And we will look forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Black Landing Forum. Take care.
Alright, guys.